Hello, hello, and welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us today from all over the world, as we're joined today by people from 29 different countries, which is such a great pleasure to be joined by such an international audience. We have people from a variety of job roles today, including community managers, founders, CEOs, digital engagement officers, but also a lot of very different backgrounds, just to name a few. Thank you all for joining us today just another time, and super thank you for both of our amazing speakers, Dagmar and Eva. Before we dive into the session today, and the essence of the session, please let me make you aware that you can ask all of the questions that you have throughout the whole webinar in the Q&A box, and we will do our best to answer them live at the end of the session, because we will be having some time scheduled just for that. So my name is Dhia Hayouni. I am a customer success manager here at Hivebrite. I'm sorry you're going to hear me cough a little bit because I'm recovering from COVID, but just disregard that for the moment. Today, I'm joined by two amazing women, Dagmar, CEO at Shell Alumni Network, and Eva, community manager at MGG Network, which is a short for Managing Global Governance Network. Dagmar has worked for 15 years in human resources and as a change management leader in global roles in Shell. She's currently leading two very different global networks. Both of them are powered by Hivebrite, which is great, and both are vastly different. The first one is Foundation Care for Brittle Bones, which is a platform for patients and healthcare providers of a rare bone disease. And the second one, which is going to be the focus of today's session, which is the social enterprise Shell Alumni Network. On the other hand, we have Eva with us. Eva is a researcher with the German Development Institute. Her main fields of work are sustainability transformations and transnational cooperation. She manages the Managing Global Governance Network, which is short for MGG. The members of this MGG network come from all sectors and 6 emerging powers, and Europe included too. So with no further ado, let's get into the discussion part. I know I introduced a little bit both of the communities as I was just speaking, but why don't we hear a little bit more from their both direct managers? Dagmar, maybe let's start with you.
Thank you. And great to meet everyone virtually in this webinar. So I am Dagmar Mekking, Director of Shell Alumni. We are a community of currently 1,150 people. They're all people who used to work for Shell. Our purpose is to drive value for alumni and the world around us. So from that, you already hear there's a bit of a social element to it. We are independent from Shell. We don't receive any funding from Shell, and we're really working it from the needs of our alumni upwards, so to speak. And we have 3 main goals. One is the connection of the community, meeting old friends, meeting new friends within the community. Secondly, the learning and development. And thirdly, the creating of tangible opportunities for everyone individually at their point in life where they're changing something quite significantly, creating opportunities for the businesses people are setting up, and creating opportunities for the charities that many of them are involved in. So just in terms of the activities that we're running, very heavily leaning on webinars. We are a grassroots community, and I'll talk more about that, but about 20 webinars are held every month in our network, and most of them, 92%, are by alumni for alumni. So happy to talk about that more later on.
Amazing. Well, thank you for that presentation. I think the 2 points that I would want our audience here to keep in mind is that it's a grassroots community, but also it's a membership-based community, which is very different from what Eva is managing, the MGG network. So Eva, why don't you let us know about your community a little bit more?
Yeah, thank you very much, Dhia, and also thank you for already introducing it a little bit. So as you just said, MGG is standing for Managing Global Governance, and this is generally a project that is hosted by the German Development Institute. So it is based at a research institute in Germany. And we are working with a transnational network with people from all sectors, coming from 6 emerging economies and Europe. And the network was already founded in 2007. So we're not that young anymore, but we only moved into our digital home, so to speak, this year in April, May. And our program generally, and also the network activities therefore have like 3 main pillars, and that is training. So every year we have a training course with 23 people, who then afterwards also join the network. We have research cooperation, and we have policy advice activities. And this is actually what our network is based on. It's not nearly as big as Dagmar's network. So we have at the moment around about 500 people in our network. Yeah,
amazing.
and,
well,
yeah,
go ahead. Amazing. Thank you for that presentation. Maybe I can stay with you here by taking the first step at our first question. Throughout my experience as a customer success manager in the community management industry, I know it's very important to really minimize the time to value ratio when the user comes in, from the time they can come in to the time they see the value in the community. How are you doing this, and what was really your thought process going into this challenge?
Maybe before I come to my theoretical thought process, I would share one major learning that I had, and that is expectation management. And that means mainly on the community manager side, right? So there might be a gap, and this is what I found out at some point, between what I, as the community manager, think would be a good frequency, for instance, how often people should log in or check the network, then it's a success. And how people actually feel themselves, they need to log in so that they feel well connected and they feel good about that experience. And I had to kind of recheck that and get feedback from our members to feel, okay, maybe even if I'm desperate because I feel, oh God, times between check-ins get far too long, people might be absolutely happy with it and feel, I feel I'm perfectly informed and feel well connected. That's the first thing. The second point is a structural point, so that we really made very clear, and that with the not so sexy communication via old-fashioned email, letting our network know, hey, at some point our entire communication will switch to Hivebrite. So you won't get emails from us anymore if you are not on the platform, and then you get maybe campaign emails, but classical emails, we will fade out. We have something better now. That would be the second thing. And I think the third point would be really the kind of personal connection. We have national contact points that I will talk more about in a minute, but mostly only also to allow people to make connections on the platform quite immediately. So tag people, connect them if they're working on similar topics, live and also asynchronously. So having webinars, but also, really just when they already exchange content, make connections where people might not see them at first glance.
Very insightful. That's great. Thank you. Dagmar, what about your case?
Well, in our case, I'd like to just emphasize kind of a generic thought we'd like people to get. So they often come from a corporate environment, and maybe that's unique to Shell and maybe it's not, but oftentimes big organizations tend to have a bit of a pyramid type structure. And there's, some hierarchy applied, and we are the opposite. We really are a complete grassroots community. And I would like everyone who's coming into the network to realize that it's their candy store. It's their access to whatever they individually need for at that stage in their life, or what they need for their business, or what they need for their charity. So if we're able to get that thought across, then I think the rest kind of unrolls by itself, because obviously often people first want to look around a little bit, observe what's going on. And as Eva was just describing, some people are perfectly fine to just basically be a part of a network. That's what they want and need. They're busy with any other things, for example. But there's also people who are in that absorption mode where they want to be learners. That is definitely one of the most popular ranges. People are just really lifelong learners and curious to learn from other people what they're doing, as they're all reinventing themselves after leaving the company. And then there's the third group, a category of users, which I would call the movers and shakers. Often these are the heavy influences of networks, and also very valuable people for us, because they will take initiatives forward, etc. So all in their own way, if they understand it's their candy store, they're in charge of the speed, they're in charge of maybe also taking forward initiatives that we will not set up for them, but really we want them to come up with ideas, then we should always be fine. So that's the basic idea I would like everyone to get as they're coming in.
Amazing. So it's fair to say that your thought process is categorizing your community between learners to movers and shakers, which is actually a very good segue, let's say, to my next point, which is how do you personalize your onboarding, Dagmar? Because you have these 3 different categories. How do you make sure that this person gets what he wants and that person gets what he wants, which is very different?
Great point, because I would not really know who's in which category at this point in their life, right? So I wouldn't say that we individualize it, but we have set it up structurally to be flexible, to meet those different needs. And how do we do this? For example, we are collecting information in the registration process when people are joining as a member. Mm-hmm. That is very thoughtfully put together, so that we actually have an idea if people are, for example, in an entrepreneur type modus, or if they have joined another company. So that would already give us an indication how we can meet their needs. Also, there's a moment when they're joining a webinar, for example, it's very easy to see who's recently joined that Shell Alumni network. And so I would just call them out and allow them to kind of introduce themselves. So we get to know a little bit, recent information on where they are at that point in time in their lives. But most importantly, also we have introductory webinars, which everyone can join. Some join it straight away after becoming a member, and other people first look around a bit and then think, oh, how do I get more out of the tool? So structurally, twice a month, once in the East zone and once in the West time zone, to cover really everyone around the globe, we would have these things to allow everyone to be at their best and get whatever they need out of the network.
Amazing. I really like that. That's great. Moving to Eva with the same question, and maybe as your direct point of contact since the beginning of our relationship here, I followed you throughout, let's say, every step of the way. And I know that you structure already your onboarding process in different phases, and that each phase unlocks, let's say, a new module or a new feature. Can you tell me and Dagmar a little bit more, but also mainly our audience, a little bit more about that? And how did you choose specifically which module comes first?
Yeah, sure. Thank you. So first of all, again, it was a bit like expectation management or also perception, because my initial thought was that I feel, okay, we need everything at once. It should be interesting and inspiring, and people should need things to discover. And similar to what Dagmar explained in the beginning, this is in the reality, unfortunately, mostly not how people in the beginning look at those platforms, right? They don't have much time, they are working full time or have families or both. They need to find what they want to find quickly, or they have to be inspired but quickly, right? And this is why we thought it might make sense that we have a staggered process and people can kind of discover bit by bit and don't feel overwhelmed from the beginning. And what you can see here is that we only had like a very limited set of features that we had open in the beginning, which is news, the exchange section, how we call it, so that's the forums, and of course the network members or like people section. And what we did then is to open those features first, which put a focus on network communication as such. As I mentioned, we have subnetworks, like national subnetworks. And we also have people who know a few people already because they had the same course, right? They have been in the same year, so to speak. So this was the only exception that we actually did. So we gave people these 2 hooks at the platform saying, okay, if you get completely lost, these are the 2 groups that you can go to where you know people, right? So like at a party, you know nobody, but you know, okay, I have these 2 friends with me and I can go back to them if everything goes wrong. And apart from that, we focused on events and projects and later opportunities as well, to give people an idea, okay, what can you discover outside your bubble, so to speak.
Yeah.
And that was actually one thing that had been asked from us for years already. People said it's such a pity that we can't contact people in the network that we don't know yet. And with this, we actually built this bridge first, and only later on came to features which then go more into depth of content, for instance.
Good. So it's fair, let's say, to say that you made it in a way to minimize the change to people because they know their bubble, they know where to go, but also bring in another platform, which is already a big change, and then expand a little bit by that.
Yeah, exactly.
Great. That's good. Great. So we talked about your thought processes and the journey that you took to build your current onboarding strategies. Now, really in terms of actions, how are you, Dagmar, ensuring, for example, that you create a positive but also a welcoming environment for newcomers? How do you encourage them to engage from the moment they sign in into Shell Alumni Network?
Let me give you a picture. Every single time when somebody joins our network, we really want them to have as many of kind of contact points as possible. Think of every contact point as like a little metal pin, and every individual metal pin is just small and pretty worthless maybe, but the more of these metal pins, anchors you have, it becomes a really solid connection. And I can say hand on heart that the community we've built, and we are now 1.5 years down the road, is really one of the most engaged networks, if not the most engaged network I've come across in my life. So it really works that way. So it's as many metal little pins as you want to create contact points, and it'll grow. And so what are we doing? For example, I mentioned already that we are calling out people when they're joining a webinar and they're fairly new, but we also recognize some people may have been in the network for a little longer, but maybe haven't made that many new connections. It's always good to, or certainly in this Corona environment, to keep networking and also refreshing your group of acquaintances. So what we're doing is at the end of a webinar, we would just, we do that quite often actually, end with a socializing part, which is in Zoom, you can run breakout rooms. And we just basically split people into random groups of 3 to have a quick chat, 5 minutes, and some carry on for an hour, but to encourage a bit of that personal sharing and that you know a little bit more about each other. So that's on the social side, one of the little clips. But then also you want people to understand what they can get out of the tool. For example, when people are newly joining, they're often really like, wow, that this even exists. So they know Facebook, they know LinkedIn, but this is different. Yeah. And so they want to know how they can share that with other people. So you want them to understand how they can, for example, refer someone from their own friends to the network effectively. So we have little tutorial videos for that, where they can just see how it works. It actually is user-friendly and self-explanatory, but some people still value, and it also gives them an idea on what they can do themselves to do something back for the network. So tutorial videos, the welcome videos I talked about before, and breakout groups are just some of the things we are doing to structurally help people to make these linking moments.
That's great. And I love the analogy that you just mentioned about the pin. So thank you for that. I think that would stick to my mind for quite some time. But also I wanted to mention something that one of my clients also did, is that when you talked about webinars, welcoming webinars and things like that, what they included, they pretty much did the same thing, but also in a scavenger hunt and more like in a fun way. So they ask people to go comment here. They put some comments here, some likes there, some people faces and stuff like that, and made a whole game out of it, so that when you go to forums, you look into the comments. Now you know that forums has the comments possibility. You take that clue, you come back to news, you go to events, and that's your scavenger hunt. So I just wanted to mention that for everyone's sake, let's say, for the audience.
Great idea. I think I'm going to do that too.
Great. Yeah, it's fun. It definitely does not work with every community, because some communities are more professional, but hey, if you have the opportunity, that's great. Eva, what about from your side? What are the actions that you took to engage the community as soon as they sign in?
Like a few things I already mentioned. What we also did, we also have tutorials, because I totally agree with Dagmar. Even so, I think many things, like most things, are so self-explanatory. It is as if people are calmer if they know, okay, I have watched the tutorial and now I can do it, right? And I can relate to that. So I think that's a very good thing. We also did like onboarding webinars specifically in the beginning, where we also sometimes really in little steps. So people, okay, now we take 10 minutes and we take them together and you jazz up your profile, right? And there is no, yeah, I will do that later, or yeah, the picture comes later. And of course, you have to do that in a charming way and also don't push people too much. But it really kind of helped because people had already blocked that time in their calendar, right? And one thing that we, for instance, once had that was a nice thing is that, as I said, people always say we would like to meet also people from other courses and other batch groups. And since similar, I think, to Dagmar's network, we're so spread globally, it rarely ever happens, right? That you have big meetings where really people can meet. So I had one webinar where I had a participant from the very last course that we had, so 2019, and I had a participant from the very first course in 2007. And they met, and they would have never met, actually, if we wouldn't have had that webinar. So that was, I think, one little success. And since then, I know they know each other, right? So yeah, and another thing is that we really try to, as far as possible in Corona times, to connect what is happening on the community platform to what is actually really happening in the program. So if we have, for instance, we did barcamp sessions, conferences where users choose and decide which sessions are offered and which sessions are held. And we kind of transfer that to the platform. And we're not doing it just to get people on the platform, but we're saying this is what is happening anyways. But since you're on the platform, you have the chance to participate. And this is what worked really well for us so far.
That's good. And maybe if I can come back to that point when you mentioned that user from program 2007 and user from program 2019 just met for the first time, that's right, there is a value added to both of those users to meet each other, being part of the same program, but two different cohorts. And maybe if I can add on that, I do have a couple of clients that actually, after each webinar they do, maybe they're doing 20 webinars like you, Dagmar, or a few webinars like you, Eva. After every session they do, they go and ask, they go and ask their users in a very, very quick survey, how many people did you meet for the first time during the session that you have never met before? Maybe you saw their names, maybe you saw their comments, but you never really entertained a quick conversation with that person or a quick hi. And then the results from that are always astonishing because people come from different places and different areas of the world, and they just connect right there. And that's for them like a something or a metric. Maybe I'm getting ahead of myself by measuring all of this, but they go back to their board members and say, listen, this is how many people we have connected for the month of April versus the month of August and throughout the whole year. So I just wanted to also bring that up. If I can move on to my next question. I know, and I think we all know, that onboarding is really just the beginning of any relationship with the members. How are you keeping that early spark ignited with your more mature users? Because now your onboarding is still continuing, but what about the early ones? Dagmar, do you want to take a first stab at that?
Well, I think we actually messed it up in the first place. So I think we've really had a learning that we thought once people have had a good onboarding, things would be automatically continuing in a very closely engaged way. And at some point in time, I remember somebody asked me a question that I wasn't able to answer. It was about how many people are actually in your networks. And And let me explain what the networks really mean to us, to give you a bit of context. So as I said, we are a grassroots community, and networks can be created by anyone as long as they have an idea and can flesh it out a bit with a bit of a charter on what their goals are and who they're trying to address, etc. We allow them to set up another network. Doesn't cost anything extra. So we have 17 networks by now, corralling around things like energy transition, but also finance, HR, or mindfulness. It's very diverse and really has very loyal followers. And I always say the networks are the heart of Shell Alumni. So they're very important. And so this person asked, so how many people are actually hooked up to a network? Or several maybe, and I didn't know. So I did a little bit of homework to look at the numbers. And I was a bit shocked to find out that only 30% had actually joined a network. 60% had not. So it was very clear that there was an intention to join networks, and then life takes over, and they never actually got there. So I was really surprised. I had not realized that. And so what we then did is a bit of a catch up in the first place. So everyone was not at all connected to a network. We basically collected that information with a little survey. And then we've added them in with a kind of manual action from our side. And also, secondly, we've changed the onboarding process to ask that question. Which network would you like to join? Very simple. And then we find that people usually tick between 2 and 6 different networks. They're very, very eager to get involved. And if we then check after 1 or 2 months and they haven't joined yet, we can still add them in. Also, from a data privacy angle, we would not want to add people in just because we believe they have an interest in HR because they've previously been in HR, stuff like that. You don't want to do that, but you really wanted to hear from them. And so that's what we now fixed in our registration process. And that keeps them engaged. So every time we have an HR related webinar, we would be able to invite those people. And if they don't want to hear from us too often, they can change their settings and then they will only hear much less often. So it's actually making sure it's meeting the needs again of our community now much better than it was before.
Amazing. That's good. What about you, Eva, in terms of, so this is more was like a learning from Dagmar's perspective. If you can share learning from your side, and then I'll be back to another last question just for you.
Yeah, one thing is very similar to what I actually already said to the question that you asked before. That is, one learning that I had is don't assume too much. So if people don't do things on the platform because this is absolutely obvious, just do it. And that then sometimes the personal contact really makes the difference, right? Not only because people don't see through how they use a feature, but also more, okay, what is the purpose of it? So why should I use that and that? And that is very easy to do if you have a 5 minutes chat, than to have an entire purpose page or whatever explaining that, at least in our case. And another thing, as I said, is it is a bit different for us because the network already existed before and sub-networks already exist. And we actually made our liaison persons, which are the contact points of the national subnetworks to us and the SDMGG team. They are really our kind of co-community managers, right? And they really also make sure that they transfer whatever they do in the network anyways, and of course they do much more if they are allowed to meet, and that was quite difficult now, but still sometimes they could meet in smaller groups, that they really also bring that to the network and the exchange that they have. And I think that really makes a difference because that kind of normalizes it, right? That shows, okay, this is just an additional tool that allows us to do more than we did before. And at the same time, we're also continuing the same path in a way.
Great.
Yeah,
so if I come back to both of your learnings, I think for Dagmar, it's somehow like just making sure that you draw somehow your whole process, and then just like quality control, know that you have something here that you need to either measure or report on or just check for more insurance from your side. And then for Eva, yeah, expectations. I think that's something we always tell our clients to, I wouldn't say yeah, just to manage the expectations as much as possible, because your fast-paced, tech-savvy Eva is not going to be that tech-savvy from, or that fast-paced from X user or Y user from whatever community. Those are two very great insights. Maybe Eva, I can come back to you in terms of one last question. How are you keeping that early spark ignited with your users? I know you do some call to actions throughout your community. I know you also do some different other stuff, but I'll let you tell us more about that.
Yeah, the call to action is like a nice thing that actually came from a colleague of mine who just, as a user, also posted on the platform. And that is actually, I'm not sure if it's really applicable to all communities, but if they have a specific point in common, in our case, that is, most of them, except the last 2 years, which have done online programs, they all spent 3.5 months in Bonn when they did their Managing Global Governance course, right? And some of them did that in 2019, and some of them that did that back in 2007. And we had a call to action saying, okay, share your favorite Bonn moment as a picture or as a post. And there were so many nice things coming together. And that's, of course, more a kind of socializing, the socializing dimension. But it was something that apparently there was a demand for, or there was a resonance to, at least. That is one thing. And another thing really is the networking, the connection of networking and content exchange or knowledge cooperation, which we do in the so-called bar camps that I already mentioned. So we have slots where participants decide on the topics of the sessions that we have. Unfortunately, it's mostly very short because 7 o'clock in the morning Mexico is 11 o'clock in the night China, but still we have 2 hours in the middle of the day for us where it kind of works. And then new as well as older or more experienced members can suggest sessions and just share insights, and at the same time, as a kind of side effect, of course, get to know each other and get connected based on specific interest, and be it just a very kind of at the first glance superficial thing of we are both working in green finance or something. Yeah. Yeah, but things like that we do it.
Cool, and I think that also answers one of the questions that were asked in the Q&A. They're asking, considering it's a new platform to use, not Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, how are you making sure that people return to the platform? And I think that pretty much answers that question. Maybe if I can stick around with you, Eva, for one more point before going to Dagmar, because I do have one last question for her. Since I just mentioned Facebook, LinkedIn, Instagram, WhatsApp, whatever, I know that your community before, you guys used to talk through WhatsApp because there's the central MGG network, there's the central, let's say, organization, but there's 6 different emerging countries in South Africa, Mexico, and everywhere else. And those discussions used to happen through WhatsApp. You mentioned at the beginning that you told people that, hey, we're going to stop communicating through here, we're going to bring you to Hivebrite. Can you tell us a little bit more about that? Was it just that notification, or also more into it, let's say?
That would be nice. No, we're actually still in the middle of that. And it is also like that was focusing on our communication. So even though I don't like the term, we could call it the kind of central communication, right? So from the organizing team and from the institute to the network. And that was one reason that we also wanted to have change, right? Because we said we don't want to be actually the spider in the net, right? Who's the only one, or the only one who has all the contacts, for instance. But due to data security reasons, that was just the case, right? Because we can't just give people email addresses of other people or whatever. And that's different if they are on the platform and they are themselves responsible for what they want to share. And of course, we have regulations for that as well, of course, but generally they can approach each other then. Still, we are still in the process of that. So I think there are people who are just so used to communicating by email, and I can also understand that, that they really have to get used to a new platform and to another style of communication as well. With regard to WhatsApp, we said like from the beginning that it's not our first aim to substitute those WhatsApp groups. So we would just try to show over time that with Hivebrite they can do much more than what they can do in WhatsApp groups. If some are very much in love with that messenger, they should continue to use it. I don't think that's a big issue. Right? Yeah, but that's also that's another level kind of, because they are the liaison persons are more or less in charge, and they make the connection to the community platform as well. So we feel we're kind of safe on that part.
That's great. Yeah, so I think at this point, like, it's super fair to call them ambassadors, because that's what they represent to you. It's your eyes and ears throughout those 6 different emerging countries or economies, and they refer back to you, and they go to tell those users what you think, but also get their insights so that you do better throughout the community, and then users see better value. Thank you for that insight. Dagmar, one question for you here. You mentioned at the beginning that you do have a that Shell Alumni Network is probably one of the best engaged communities that you ever came across. Can you tell us a little bit more about, I know it's a grassroots community, but I'm sure there's some actions that you take every once in a while, especially maybe for people to activate their accounts, because I see a question saying we have uploaded our members and still have a little bit of low activation. How did you go about that? Because I'm sure you faced it.
Oh, most definitely. I truly believe in making people work. So it does not work for any community to just do everything for people and hope they're going to love it. The way human beings kind of tick is when there's a lot going on, and we all know it's a noisy world, is really to make them think for themselves and make them do the actions themselves. So we have also identified, that what you call ambassadors, we call them a bit differently, but in the end of the day, every community has their early movers, and those people who like to coordinate and bring people together. And so we have a group of 50, a bit more, network leaders. And so they are really the ones who are constantly making sure we learn. So I would really see ourselves as a learning community. That's why it never becomes boring, because someone of these 50 super engaged people will always have found a new IT tool that makes it even more fun to virtually engage, because we're pretty much doing everything virtually, whether it's a mural or Jamboard or AHA slides. There's always things that just a bit of a different twist. Everyone has seen Mentimeter, so let's do something else. That's the idea. And that also makes that we are all collectively learning far faster, and it becomes exciting, and everyone who is in those sessions will actually take something out of the session, and that will make that person more engaged. You really need to make them work. That's what I said. And I would like to use then the word that Eva told me, actually, the word of swarm intelligence. So everyone can learn by themselves, surely. They're all kind of grown-up people, but together we can learn so much faster, and also see much easier if there are trends, for example, that are relevant. And that's very much what makes this an exciting place, and people come back to that, and they're kind of all involved at some point in time. I think we're just 1.5 years down the road, but we see the pace of engagement accelerate because we make them work. So that's, I guess, the summary of my message.
That's good. That's sharp on point. Thank you for that. A quick question. I saw a question coming into the Q&A box. It says, how do you re-engage community members that have gone quiet? Do you remove inactive participants?
Oh, if I may jump into that one for a second, because I actually was just working on one of the on a similar aspect, really. We have the engagement score, which frankly is one of the best things about Hivebrite, and one of the reasons I've chosen for Hivebrite. The engagement score allows you to define what engagement looks like and how you actually will measure. How will you know that people are engaged or not? You can also see how often people have actually simply logged into the platform. That's a different way, but you will see that there are some people that are not showing up very often. And in our case, we have a paid membership network. People are all paying about 100 euros a year. So we know if people are not logging into, they will probably not prolong their membership. So we have a very vested interest in making sure people even know what's there to get. So we do follow up, not one-on-one, but we ask that again to those network leaders. Hey, be aware, there's a couple of people who are a bit passive. Maybe you want to just send them a LinkedIn message or so until they actually understood how it works, and then it'll be fine.
That's good. And also what you mentioned at the beginning, because those network leaders also go at the beginning when the user comes in to welcome him, whether through a message on Hivebrite or LinkedIn or whatever other tool if they know them from. That also, if they're going to remind them in a few weeks or a few months, that also has an advantage.
It's the metal pin thing. So just one single visit to the platform may not kind of make it obvious what how they can engage, how they can grow the value by themselves from the network. But if you create a few of more of these linking moments, then it'll grow on them.
Exactly. I do have my own thoughts about removing unactivated participants. And for me, I don't really recommend something like that. What I do recommend is more what Eva is doing with an ambassador program, what you also are doing with this networks, which are also called ambassador programs, if we want to globalize them in such a way, because those people are going to be, again, your ears and eyes throughout the whole community, and they can go put another spot on that pin to talk to that person again and again and make them come back. But also it falls on you, Eva, and you, Dagmar, as community managers to always bring in something new to the community and be challenge yourselves, but also make sure that there's value for the community members. I think all of the insights here are good, so thank you so much for that. Keeping an eye on the time, I don't know if we do have any other questions from the Q&A box. Let me give that a quick look. Yeah, I don't think there's any other questions that we, what do you think about community initiatives to promote a newly launched product? Is that something that you have some insights about?
It depends a bit if it's an own product or a member product. In terms of a member product, we definitely have, so because we're also trying to create business value, we, for example, have started to hold pitch sessions for startups. And so we're doing that internally at the moment because we have quite a number of people who are investors. So we have an investor community and we have a startup community. And every now and then we bring them together. We're very happy with each other. And I'm pretty sure we will eventually have the muscle strength to also promote products into the external world with the many networks that exist. But we first want to learn that really well. But yeah, definitely this is, there's plenty of ways you can create business value, because one of the golden things today is really a community of trust. There's no better way to recommend any product or get the promotion out there than through networks and other people talking about it.
Of course. Yeah, definitely. Again, so just looking again at the time, we're sad that obviously we're out of time. So thank you very much for all the questions, dear audience, and thank you for being here with us today, especially Dagmar and Eva. Once again, thank you for sharing all of your insights and your amazing experiences. We'll be sharing the recording for this webinar by email. So if you have any questions, please just hit the reply button and email us and let us know. A survey link has already been dropped in the chat, so we would really appreciate if you could just take 1 minute or 20 seconds to give us your feedback on today's webinar so that we can keep improving here at Hivebrite. Thanks again. And yeah, thank you again one last time, Eva and Dagmar. Hope to see you very, very soon.
Thank you, Dhia, and thanks to the team.
Thank you very much. It was a pleasure.